Hello, bonjour, welcome everyone. We'll be starting momentarily. My name is Colin Burrill, Director of Alumni Engagement and Community Partnerships at the Telfer School of Management. These Telfer Forums are a series of events created to engage the community in an interactive discussion on topics that are relevant to Canadians. During this pandemic, the Telfer School is hosting a special webinar series called Working Through the COVID-19 Crisis, Managing in the New Normal. These forums are designed to support our alumni community and the business community in general in navigating the current crisis. As per our usual in-person events, we'll begin with an Indigenous affirmation. We pay respect to the Algonquin people, who are the traditional guardians of this land. We acknowledge their long-standing relationship with this territory, which remains unceded. We pay respect to all Indigenous people in the region, from all nations across Canada who call Ottawa home. We acknowledge the traditional knowledge keepers, both young and old, and we honor their courageous leaders, past, present, and future. Now, before I formally introduce the first presenter for today, I'd just like to say a few words about this webinar. So please note that we will be conducting the webinar in English only. It will be recorded and emailed to all participants over the following days. Please use the question and answer feature as part of the webinar to add comments, react to other messages, and submit your questions for the Q&A portion of the presentation. So with that, I'd like to kick off the webinar by inviting Lydia Di Francesco, alumnus of Telfer and CEO of the Employee Wellness and Consultant at Fit+Healthy 365, to lead us in a short breathing meditation. Lydia?
Thanks, Colin. It's great to be here. So what I'm going to do right now is just invite you to close your eyes and get into a comfortable position, whatever that is for you. And you're just going to begin by paying attention to your breathing. You're going to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. You're going to aim to breathe in for 4 seconds. Nice big long in breath. Hold for 5 to 7 seconds, and then breathe out nice and slow for 5 seconds. While you do this, notice the physical sensation of air filling your lungs and then slowly leaving. When your mind wanders, which it will, simply notice your thoughts and turn your attention back to breathing. Continue breathing as you think about one thing you're grateful for today. Could be something big, could be something little. Take one more deep breath in, and when you're ready, open your eyes. I had a little note, people saying they couldn't hear. They need to press play. All right, so hopefully those of you who are here and listening were able to catch that meditation. It's just a great way to, stop thinking about whatever else was going on this morning and just get grounded and focusing in on the presentation you're going to hear over the next hour.
Great. Thank you, Lydia. I'd like to now introduce Jen Bonin, alumnus at Telfer and partner at McKinsey Company. Jen received her MBA in 2015 and has also received the Telfer School of Management's Philos Award in recognition of her outstanding philanthropy work. Jen's graciously agreed to be our moderator and a presenter today, so I'll now pass the baton over to Jen to get us going.
Thank you so much, Colin, but I believe I got my MBA in 1996. Not 2015. Just a quick correction there. So thank you so much for having me here today. I'll start by stating the obvious, and it's the fact that the impact of COVID on all of us has been overwhelming, and especially when it comes to try to adapting to new ways of working and working remotely. Organizations such as McKinsey have all had to adapt, as we have all as individuals as well. At McKinsey, for example, it has fundamentally changed our culture. It's and also the way that we work. We're a global organization. We are, most of us, all role warriors. Our team norm is to always be working in person with our clients. So you can kind of imagine like the big shift that's taken place over the last few weeks for us. For me, I'm a mother of 4 kids. I work in a dual family, and I have to say I've really, really enjoyed working at home. But it hasn't been without its challenges. In my job, I could really work around the clock. So without the natural breaks of getting on a flight or driving to work or going to a restaurant, meeting a client for a drink, I've sometimes, I think, overindulged on work since the beginning of COVID. And I've had to consciously create boundaries between my work and my family life over the last year and a half. There are many new challenges related to remote working. And the problem is that by the time you figure out the new norm, things change again. So when we were all faced with dealing with the impact of social distancing a few weeks ago and moving to a remote working environment, some of the key challenges were related to establishing the right technology, the connectivity, providing employees with devices to provide them with remote access, establishing platforms for collaboration, defining team norms. But now that we're a few weeks into this, and I'll call it a marathon, and it's far from being over, people are increasingly suffering from a realm of mental health and well-being issues. This is especially true for dual working family with have children in their care full time. So the challenge for organizations and their leaders is to figure out not only how to establish team norms to keep their people productive, but it's also to find ways to support their people and show them that they care. For many, it's creating fundamental impact on the culture of their organizations, as been the case for McKinsey. So if we go to the next slide, during normal times, just a few facts. 1 in 4 people in the world will be affected by mental health challenges. 1 in 6 people experience a mental health issue just in the last week, and 2/3 of the people with known mental health symptoms never seek help from health professional. And now with COVID, there's a few new facts, which is, colleagues that are working on COVID response, whether it's on the front line or it is, sort of in an organization like myself at McKinsey, we are experiencing like very abnormally high level of anxiety. We're all feeling increasingly more lonely and disconnected, stressed, especially, if you have children under your care, be able to kind of juggle like sort of taking care of them while working. Most of us would say like have experienced like higher workload and stress, as I was mentioning, like trying to kind of like create the balance between creating natural breaks and stopping to work when it does make sense. There's been a surge in anxiety and depression, uncertainty related to job security, and of course, like last but not least, lots of us are grieving over losing loved ones. So we expect an acceleration of those effects from normal time. And so what we need to do is to enhance the level of proactive support that we provide to our colleagues and to our people and the people around us. I mentioned the working parents, face a particular challenge. So one, thing is to accept the new normal. Whether it's like the dog barking in the background and you're, having your sort of most important client meeting, or it is like a child that, really needs your attention and you need to put your meeting on pause. You have to accept that it's okay and, sort of not feeling anxious about it because it is the new norm. There's the aspect of remote babysitting, and what I, definitely don't mean by that is to actually like referring to video games as being like babysitters of our children, like Fortnite, although it does help. And I think we have to actually like understand that in the new norm, maybe it's okay. We shouldn't put so much pressure on ourselves, but a lot of people have turned to, people that are in their nuclear family or loved ones to actually sort of step in and look after, keeping their children active during the day when they know that they're going to have, both parents have like a critical meeting at the same time. I think it's important to think about creating like meaningful schedule and establishing a routine for your family, for yourself, and take time off and encourage others to do so as well. It's a little bit harder because people are feeling vulnerable and anxious with respect to, well, if I, sort of leave work, I'll be less relevant. Maybe if there's some massive layoff, then I'll be first one to go. So I think as leaders of our organization, it's important for us to actually like set the tone for allowing for our people to indeed like take that time off and the fact that it's acceptable. So at McKinsey, for example, we've given all of our employees around the world what we call it COVID days. So everybody can take 5 COVID days anytime to do whatever, sort of no justification required, whether it's to look after their family or it's just like take time off for themselves. But also we are encouraging like people moving to part-time program. We're encouraging people taking vacation. We're encouraging people taking like big blocks of time off, as there's been some of our consultants that for them it's almost become a little bit impossible to do the client work at the moment because they do need to be on site. And I think so as leaders, it's important to establish also and foster forums for all employees to exchange their experiences, their ideas on how to best cope with the crisis. So if we go to the next slide, I mentioned employee well-being is particularly important. And there's like 3 sort of aspects that we can kind of look at. One being mind, body, and purpose. On mind, it's increasingly important to actually like find ways to be resilient and emotionally flexible. Meditation is a really good tool, but connecting with people is also extremely helpful. I find one good practice to kind of keep your mind healthy is to actually like identify 3 to 4 people whom you're going to reach out to in any given day, whether it's just like a check-in for 5 minutes or it's a longer conversation. And these people not being sort of necessarily not to be talking about work, but just about life in general is a good way to kind of keep your mind healthy. On body, I mean, sleep patterns, nutrition, like are becoming even more important as we kind of like change those habits because we're all working remotely. But physical activity is also really important, and I know for some people it's not as easy to carry out those physical activity as possible. So one of personally my best practice is to make sure that I alternate between Zoom meetings and calls. And every time I have a call, I try to just walk, whether it's inside my house or outside if it's not too cold. And it is actually sort of a good way to get quite a few steps in for the day. And on purpose, it's really important to stay connected to your communities. And if it's a little bit more difficult to do that, whether it's you all know someone who's actually probably on the front line or involved in dealing directly with the COVID crisis in some way, and again just reaching out to that someone on a regular basis and offering how you can help, I find is a good way to sort of like reground all of us. So in summary, current uncertainties, media buzz, combined with the shift to a remote operating model, definitely can create challenges on each one of those dimensions. So it requires employers to provide support in all sorts of different ways. And some of our guest speakers will be giving you some examples of what that might look like, during this webinar. This is just a few useful resources. We have our McKinsey Center for Societal Benefit through Healthcare, where you can see and find more interesting data on COVID that gets updated on a regular basis. And also you'll hear a lot from our speakers on some of those aspects. So I'll turn it now over to Jennifer Dimoff, who's an assistant professor at the Telfer School of Management. So Dr. Dimoff's primary area of research focuses on the intersections between leadership, occupational health and safety, and employee training and development. Most notably, Dr. Dimoff co-developed the mental health awareness training, one of the first scientifically evaluated mental health training programs for workplace leaders to demonstrate return on investment. So over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Jen, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. As Jen mentioned, my background, I'm an assistant professor at the Telfer School of Management, and my background is in something called industrial organizational psychology, which is essentially the study of people and work. And my specific area of research is on the intersection between leaders, managers, and employers, and the impact that they have on employee mental health and well-being. So I'll be presenting some information generally on, in normal circumstances, how leaders can help support and protect employee mental health and well-being, but I'll also be diving into some COVID-specific research that we've been doing and that we're actually collecting right now as we speak. And that's research funded by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research on how organizations can better support employee mental health and well-being. So before diving into that, I want to provide us with a general summary, because in talking about mental health and mental illness, we need to know what we're talking about in the first place. So what is mental health? What are mental health problems? What are mental illnesses? Mental health at the bottom of the pyramid there in the green zone is a state of positive well-being where people are able to cope and respond adaptively to everyday stressors and challenges. When there is some kind of compromise in this ability, people can develop mental health problems. So these would be things like strain or burnout. So not necessarily diagnosable illnesses, but a compromise in health and well-being. At the top of the pyramid is the red zone. This is mental illness. These are diagnosable illnesses such as generalized anxiety, clinical depression, schizophrenia, post-traumatic stress disorder, where they're categorized within the Diagnostic Statistics Manual for mental illnesses and other clinical disorders. And what we're seeing is, under normal circumstances, any one of those 5 risk factors that are listed on that slide can be enough to exacerbate an existing mental health problem, to perpetuate it towards a mental illness, or to exacerbate an existing mental illness that someone has, to make the symptoms worse. Now we are faced with very abnormal circumstances where employees are dealing with not just one of those risk factors, but they are dealing with all of those risk factors in some circumstances. So even though there's not necessarily anything that managers or employers can do to eliminate those risk factors, there are a variety of things that they can do to help support employees in staying in the green zone or fluctuating between the green and orange zone, and keep them from being in that red zone, or recognizing when they have entered that red zone. So we'll transition to the role of managers. So these are the things that managers can do to support and protect employee mental health. And there's lots of research on these kind of 4 areas that have led to improvements in health and well-being, but also improvements in workplace specific outcomes like performance or productivity or turnover. So with respect to emotional support, it's very simple. And yet we see a lacking of it generally in workplace settings. Showing people that you care about them, not just their role as an employee or their purpose related to the organization, but that you care about them as a whole person. And it's fairly easy to do that. It starts with asking open-ended questions such as, how are you doing? But you could ask more specific questions like, what challenges are you facing? What can I do to make things easier for you? What can I do to support you? What do you need from me? Those questions, although very action-oriented and very focused on problem solving, they also communicate that you care about the individual, not just the individual as an employee. Then there's this kind of second component of instrumental support, which is very much about providing the tools that people need to get the job done. And those tools are going to look very different depending on the organization, depending on the specific roles of you and the employee. But this could be providing high-speed internet access, VPN access. It can come in the form of personal protective equipment for employees who are now transitioning back to the workplace or who have always been on the front lines. Making sure that people have those tools, know how to use them, and are feeling like they have some autonomy and control over the way that they use them. The third component is role modeling. We need to take care of ourselves before we can take care of anybody else. This is the old oxygen mask on the airplane scenario, where we need to put our own oxygen mask on first in order to help those around us. So model good behaviors for your own well-being, but also as a way of communicating to employees that routine is important. Prioritizing mental health, well-being, and balance is important, and not just in the do as I say, but not as I do type of scenario, but actually doing those things. So not sending emails at all hours of the day, for instance, is a good way of communicating that through your behaviors, not just through what you're saying. And then the fourth one of reducing stigma. And if you're engaging in emotional support and instrumental support and role modeling, you're going to be in a really good position to reduce stigma. But what we find in terms of the research as being really productive is talking about mental health, talking about the fact that we are all experiencing these risk factors. It is normal to not feel okay right now, but that there are resources available, and communicating those resources. So if your employer has an EAP, talking about that EAP. If there are community resources available to you very locally or at the provincial or national level, talking about those as well. So for instance, in Ontario, they're releasing some resources that are designed to provide online cognitive behavioral therapy to the general public. So emphasizing the availability of those resources if you don't have internal organizational resources like employee assistance programs. And largely what this all kind of translates to is some of our preliminary findings. This is the COVID specific findings that we've been collecting since about mid-March, and we've just gotten a second round of data that came in yesterday. So this is as real time as you can get. And what we're seeing is that managers who are not engaging in those four kind of categories of behavior, they have the employees who are experiencing higher levels of stigma. They have the employees who are experiencing low levels of both physical health and psychological health. The employees on the other side of that who have supportive leaders who are engaging in those behaviors, they're less afraid. So they're feeling more confident that their employer is supporting them. They're feeling less afraid for their own health and safety, as well as the health and safety of their families. And that's translating to improved mental health and well-being. And one of the things we got hot off the presses about an hour ago is that we're finding in retail sectors about 20% of employees are experiencing symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder to the point that they could be clinically diagnosed with PTSD. So leadership support has never been more important. So if I can leave you with 5 kind of take-home messages, they would be to show you care, provide all necessary tools, offer flexibility and autonomy. Just because something works for you doesn't mean it's going to work for your people. And to Jen's comment about the realities of people with families or caregiving responsibilities, give them flexibility and autonomy and trust them to be able to do their jobs. Remind people of mental health resources. Take care of yourself. And for the resources page here, we have a website set up for this COVID research. It's www.ohpdata.com, and you can find all kinds of employer-specific resources as well as employee-specific resources. If you're interested in participating or learning more about the study, you can find that link there too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For our next speaker, we have Lydia Di Francesco, who is CEO and employee wellness consultant at Fit+Healthy 365, is also a speaker and a certified personal trainer. So she holds a Bachelor of Social Sciences and an MBA from the University of Ottawa, and is becoming a stress-reduced fat loss practitioner. She has appeared as a TV expert, been published in national, local magazine. So very, very impressive woman. Lydia is going to take us through a health break and some practical de-stressing tips. Over to you, Lydia.
Thanks, Geneviève. All right, so I have about 5 minutes. We're going to go through this fairly quickly. I want to provide you guys with my top 3 tools and strategies to manage stress. Now, I have to preface this by saying during my Building Stress Resilience webinar, I share 12 strategies and tools. But since I have such a short amount of time, I had to pick my top 3. And they each address one aspect of the stress triad, which is made up of physical, cognitive, and behavioral aspects. So the first one is deep breathing and meditation. The cool thing about this is that breathing works in minutes and you can do it anywhere. Basically, when we control our breathing, we're telling our body that it's okay and there's no danger. Some key points to remember is breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. You want to aim for a longer out breath than in breath. In terms of meditation, for me, it's about taking time to be mindful while letting your thoughts travel through your mind and not latching onto them. And trust me, it's a practice and you do get better with time. And at the beginning, we did an example of a meditation just to show you how simple and easy it can be and how useful it is for calming your mind and your body. The next tool is affirmations and gratitude. And these literally can change your brain. Like there is scientific evidence that shows doing affirmations, doing gratitude actually changes your brain, which is amazing. Everything that we repeatedly say to ourselves out loud or in our thoughts is an affirmation, and your subconscious mind reacts as if it's the truth. And this is why we want affirmations to be stated as positive statements and in the present tense. These 2 things are the cornerstones of setting your day off on a positive note. And there's no limits to how many you can write down or think about. And in terms of gratitude, there's nothing too small to be grateful for. And if you want right now, you can write in the chat box one thing that you're grateful for so we can all practice gratitude together. And the third aspect is setting boundaries. And I think this one is really, really important given this state of life that we're in right now. It's important for you to understand yourself and realize what triggers you. It's also good to evaluate your consumption of media, regular news, social media, and negative people. Once you have a sense of your triggers, then you want to decide the type of boundary that you need. And boundaries can be as simple as checking the news only once a day, or maybe not even at all. Maybe you're muting somebody on social media. Maybe you're limiting interactions with someone. It doesn't have to be like a big fanfare thing, just whatever works for you. So that's all my time on that. We're going to get moving. But if you're curious about the 9 other strategies, send me an email and I'll share the rest with you. So now I want to invite you to get up on your feet. I'm standing here in my lovely beach room in my office. I can't see you, but I'm going to trust that you're standing up. I can see Jen, so I'll know if she's standing or not. But I want you, calling you out, Jen. I want you to start just marching on the spot. We're just going to do literally like 2 minutes of this. You're going to just march on the spot and swing your arms. So movement and exercise stimulate blood and oxygen flow through the body, which leads to a brief period of hyperoxygenation in the brain. You can stop marching now. So we're gonna now bend down and touch our toes. Okay, so you might not see me all the way down, but you're gonna bend, touch your toes. You can bend your knees slightly if you need to. And then you want to come up nice and slow, one vertebrae at a time. So nice and slow. And so what happens when we have this hyperoxidation in the brain is that it increases energy and alert attentiveness. So now we're going to come up, do a big stretch, hands up all the way to the ceiling. You're going to come up onto your tippy toes. Good. Okay, now you're going to bring your feet back down. You're going to bend to one side. So movement also promotes the production of new brain cells, which aid in creating new synapses, and that helps keep you more productive and creative. So it's really important to move throughout your day. We're going to stretch to the other side now. Good. So I don't have enough time to get into all the details about what happens when we sit, but we're just going to do a few quick neck stretches. So you're just going to stretch your neck to one side. So if you're stretching to the right, you're going to take your left hand, reach it down towards the floor. And then a little trick here, you want to now bring your chin down. That's going to stretch your neck in a slightly different way. Then you can bring your chin up. Good, and then switch to the other side. So head to the left, right hand down towards the floor like you're trying to reach. Again, bring your chin down. We're doing these really quickly, chin up. But when you do them on your own, you can take a little bit of time to do them. So I hope that helps you see that just a little bit of exercise and movement can help relieve physical and mental stress and improve your mood. I've got some resources for you, a free gratitude and success journal. And if you want to bring the Building Stress Resilience webinar to your team, to your organization, I'd be happy to give you more information about that. Just check out the link there. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lydia. Well, hopefully everybody feels like energized. I certainly do. Thank you. So our next speaker is Dr. Alexander James Corner, who's an assistant professor with the Telfer School of Management as well. Dr. Corner's research interests are centered on workplace interpersonal relationships, particularly with regard to their underlying social exchange processes. He focused specifically on understanding relationships between leaders, followers, team members, negotiators, explores aspects of cross-cultural management connected with developing successful interpersonal relationships. So over to you, Dr. Corners.
Okay, good afternoon, and thank you, Lydia, also for the exercise. I feel like I'm smiling more after getting out of my chair and moving around, so it's a good way to set up for the presentation. I'm going to be talking today about virtual teamwork, which connects a lot into the content you've just heard before me. A lot of us have moved suddenly and dramatically to full-time virtual work, even if we were exposed to it to a certain extent before. It's been a big shift for people. I'm going to go through and talk broadly about some team models and frameworks that can help us think about what's happening with virtual team dynamics and some practical ideas for the COVID situation, and then hone in a little bit more on the specifics of communication processes and the context in which we're conducting our teamwork. So first of all, thinking of that broader level, if we go to the next slide, you'll see a model of inputs, processes, outputs. So this is a well-known, one of the dominant frameworks of thinking about teamwork in general, the IPO framework, inputs, processes, outputs. And we can think how that applies over to the virtual teamwork that we are participating in, that we are leading at the moment. I'm going to start right in the center of this. So the processes phase of the model, because that's really the idea of where the magic of teamwork happens. So that's where people are working collaboratively, coming up with creative solutions. And it's underpinned to a large extent by interpersonal processes such as building trust and managing conflict. So these things are complicated in a regular team. They're made more complicated by the virtual environment. They can be given an extra layer if it's a global virtual team. And then moving suddenly also imposes a lot of challenges. And so the speech bubbles at the bottom, these are what the research indicates and what people are saying that they need in the current situation. And so the idea of clear communication, about expectations, feedback, and social connection being key aspects of what people are looking for right now in team environments. Taking a step back to look at the, still on the model, but the input side. So the input side is the setting the scene for how to achieve those successful processes. And that comes down to things like having the technology in place, having the skills in place. And so what you're seeing happening and what people are asking for is we need training, we need support. So you have webinars about how to use the new technologies, the support that's both emotional and hardware tools, software tools, getting people ready to be able to interact with their colleagues. And then with successful contributions from inputs and processes, we hope to see benefits to the outputs, whether that's performance related or more on the individual level of satisfaction with their work, their team, the environment, engagement with the organization. And there people really, I think at the moment, are hoping for awareness of the type of constraints they're facing, understanding of what's achievable, what's not achievable, and some flexibility, as we've heard before. So moving on, we'll get into a bit more detail. So first of all, that middle piece, so the communication piece that underpins a lot of the teamwork processes. And I want to bring up there a couple of communication models, again, well-known communication models that set the scene for some of the challenges we face right now. So the basic communication model, the idea that we have a sender who's got an idea they want to transmit to the receiver. Often in teams, that's multiple senders, multiple receivers, and trying to make sure people can get on the same page with the idea being communicated. That consists of a message that's being formulated, a content that's being put together, and a channel that's being passed through. And then usually in two-way communication, some level of feedback, acknowledging or clarifying. And the idea that noise can interfere a lot with this message being passed. And so again, especially in this virtual environment, there can be a lot of noise from some of the challenges we have with communication technologies, bandwidth problems, frozen screens, all these kind of things that just add to the complexity. The image we have on this screen is it's about media richness. And so showing that we move from the bottom of that chart with less rich forms of communication. So there's less content, less context when you have, for example, an email being sent out versus at the very top, the face-to-face communication that we no longer have being the richest form of communication. The idea there is that with face-to-face, we can be most effective with high quality communication. There's a lot of body language helping us to get our message across. And so face-to-face is the ideal for high quality communication. In the absence of that, video conferencing can help us to overcome some of the challenges of less rich media. However, when I mention here the appropriate channel of communication, I think one of the things we're facing right now is people talking about Zoom fatigue, having too much rich content and that imposing pressures on them. And so the idea that if you can achieve something with a 2-minute telephone call, perhaps we don't need to set up a longer video conference in this situation. Also coming to things like social happy hours that can be very helpful for helping to create that connection. But that once you start to add too many people, you can lose the high quality communication. And so once we get above 4, 5, 6 people on a call, it's very hard to have everyone involved in a conversation and experiencing a positive experience of that atmosphere. And then if we go to the third slide, so the idea of the context, so this is the input side, setting up the right type of resources that can help us to work together in teams and trying to minimize some of the excessive demands we're facing right now. I pulled a couple of images from the recent NFL draft that took place in the USA to take college athletes to sports teams a couple of weeks ago. And we see there these idyllic images of home work environments, the perfect technology setup with multiple screens and opportunities to communicate, beautiful lights, working spaces where we can relax and be comfortable and look out at the view. Obviously, this is not the reality for most people. We're working in attics like mine, basements if we're lucky, often dining tables, shared work and life spaces, and so that can be very challenging. And so trying to help our team members to have the right technology in place, hardware and software, understanding the limitations sometimes of our physical environment, And then also thinking a lot about the use of time. So I'll focus a little bit on that, the idea that sometimes synchronous communication can be tough to get everyone on calls at the same time. We've mentioned the idea of childcare responsibilities, other care responsibilities. Sometimes asynchronous communication can be better. So the idea of also, for example, this webinar being recorded and being available to people at a later date, perhaps not all being capable of watching this for an hour and a half right now in the middle of the day. And so that being an option for the evening and things like that. And so what I want to emphasize, picking up on the previous presentations as well, is that we have best practices. People are trying to do their best, and we're trying to understand what we can do to help each other, communicate with people what they can do to help us, adapt our best practices. It is very much not a business as usual environment. So we need to be understanding, we need to be kind to ourselves and each other, and use these models, set up the best inputs we can, create the environment for the best communication we can, but acknowledge that it's not the same as it was in early March. And so the final slide, I have a few resources there, some quick reads that are just the idea of this has happened, we're working remotely suddenly, what can you do? And some deeper dives on books and papers that can get into the more detailed background. So I hope that can be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, AJ. So we're ready to move to our last speaker. We're very privileged to have with us today Janeen Speer, who's the Vice President of Talent at Shopify. So Janeen is an experienced HR and leadership development practitioner in a variety of sectors, post-secondary education, retail, airline, technology. She has a degree in psychology, master in business, and is also a certified coach. She's spent the bulk of her career in high-growth organizations such as Shopify with a strong people and culture focus. And some of those other organizations she's worked with include Starbucks, Lululemon, WestJet. So thank you, Janeen, for being with us today, and over to you.
My pleasure. And I'm just going to take a few minutes here and give you some practical examples of, I really think, the culmination of everything that we've heard today, and some great tips from all of the speakers preceding me. At Shopify, we are a global organization. We have over 5,000 employees that we are, working to support through this interesting time. And I'll start off with what I have found to be my biggest learning here, which is regardless of someone's situation or place in the world, we're really finding this journey to be a very personal one, a very individual one. So, we found that we've got parents at home with kids who are having the time of their lives and really enjoying, figuring out how to work amongst that. We have parents at home with kids who are really struggling and really trying to find their rhythm. Similarly, we've got folks at home on their own, who actually thought they would do great with this and are really missing the day-to-day contact of their coworkers. So what we've tried to do at Shopify is really just create a variety of options for folks to choose and to decide for themselves what it is that will serve them best right now. So I'm just going to give you a few examples of some of the things we've done. So I'm actually going to start off with caregivers because we've talked a lot about that group today. And for us, a caregiver is someone who might be looking after a little person at home or might be looking after aging relatives at home as well. So it could be anywhere on that spectrum. One of the things that we recently did is we held a panel session where we had some leaders from across the organization just talking about their experiences as caregivers. And the session was really about caring for caregivers and sort of what they have experienced and what they're noticing about their needs, in hopes that that can translate to what other leaders can offer to employees around the business. We've also had our coaching team. We have an internal coaching team who's put together a bunch of podcasts on a variety of topics, but a couple that would be relevant for this group. One was really around setting boundaries. So often when you're a caregiver, you take on all of the emotion, all of the stress, all of the worry, whether it's in your family environment or if you're a leader, it could be within your team environment. So helping folks understand how to set boundaries, how to be in some of those difficult conversations and be with someone without taking it all onto themselves. We also recently created a podcast around dealing with grief. And I know some of the speakers have talked about the fact, grief can be related to losing a loved one, but grief can also be just related to losing your day-to-day routine and experiences that you enjoy. So we've provided some supporting materials on that as well. And then, of course, for those who need it, we also have flexible options for people to work in the way they need to. And even if that means taking some days away from work on a short-term or even longer-term basis based on situation. So that's something that's available. And then finally, for caregivers, one of the things that I love is different parts of our organization have had local caregiver Slack channels pop up. So channels where people can come in and be in community. And a fun story I'll tell you about that is in one of the channels, we had an employee reach out and say, hey, I don't have kids, but I'd love to host an arts and crafts session for any of your kids that want to join if you want a quiet hour at home. And another employee reached out and said, I'm here to read stories. So some fun things have come of just those groups coming together in community. The other thing that we recognize is just the additional pressure on leaders right now. They're in whatever their own experience is, and then they're also trying to be, there for their teams and support and give direction to their teams. So we've created what we're calling a grab and go program called Leading Through Chaos, where leaders can pop in to either channels, and do some e-learning around leading in times of ambiguity, around energy management, around health and wellness resources, or they can actually go onto facilitated sessions and be part of conversations, whichever fits best their schedule. We also have some leaders coming together to create a video series where they're talking about real life examples of where they've perhaps had to pivot a team and had to take a team that had one focus and give them a new focus, and how they did that, so that our leaders can be learning from each other. And then finally, maybe just a couple things I'll share that have been made accessible to everyone at Shopify. One is our coaching team. Several of them are trained in mindfulness. So in addition to just the usual one-on-one coaching sessions that are available for all employees, we've also had some group-led mindfulness sessions to create and save some of that more reflective space for those who need that. And our culinary team, so at Shopify, we have in some of our offices teams that actually create meals when we're, in the office and working as normal. And of course, their lives have changed dramatically over the past few weeks. So one of the neat things that they did was got together and created culinary at home videos for our employees that are now cooking their own lunches or preparing food for their families to do something fun and to add a bit of levity into this new situation and give people something to look forward to on a weekly basis. So, I mean, lots more I can share. And I think right now it's probably the right time to move to Q&A. So if there's any questions about any of that, I'd be happy to expand more.
Thank you so much, Janeen. Yes, indeed, there are quite a few questions for you that have come in through our Q&A channel. We have, at least another like 10-13 minutes to go through this question. So I'll moderate you through that. I'll answer like the simplest one, which is, are the COVID days at McKinsey paid days? And yes, they are. So it's an investment we're making in our people in addition to their vacation. And again, no justification required. It's just an additional 5 days. I'm going to move, I'm going to stay with you actually. I'm going to go to Jennifer. Jennifer, what are the signs that I should look for that my employees may not be coping well with the telework environment?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. So we have collected data generally on the warning signs, the behavioral warning signs that an employee is struggling. So basically that an employee is in kind of that orange to red zone that I was talking about earlier. The transition to telework under normal circumstances is quite easy. Under these specific circumstances, it's a little bit more difficult to detect kind of these warning signs that someone is struggling in this telework situation, but there are a couple that seem to be resonating. So one of them is talking about stress generally or specific to the technology, complaining about the technology. One of the bigger ones is resistance. And this can be resistance to the telework situation. This can be resistance to using a certain platform. For instance, someone saying, I will not use Zoom. There's no way I'm going to use Zoom. I work in an education setting at the university. And so, hearing people saying things like breakout rooms won't work in this technology. It just absolutely won't work. Those types of comments, they're indications that someone is feeling fear, that someone largely is not being able to be open-minded. So those kind of the resistance, the complaining, the talking about feeling stressed, those are major indicators. One other one that's going to be more individual to individual is going to be more of a social withdrawal. So like Janeen has mentioned and AJ's mentioned and everyone's kind of mentioned to some extent, kind of virtual happy hours or providing socialization opportunities rather than just work through the technology and telework. People who would normally participate in those types of things in person, not participating in those, that would be an indication that they are overwhelmed and that they're struggling to kind of balance everything going on. So I'm sorry I don't have it really clear, but basically stress, complaining, and resistance.
Great. I'll just add one quick thing is, I mean, your people, and if you were in person with them, you'd probably be able to tell by their personal demeanor and how they're dressing and whether they're grooming or taking care of themselves. It's hard over Zoom. Speech is one way that you can actually sort of listen to your people very, very carefully. Intonation of voice, like a major change in speech pattern can actually be an indication that somebody is not doing so well as well. Next one, I'm going to go to Janeen. So what is the one thing that you enjoy most about working from home and that you want, that you want to continue even after we might be able to be back in our office?
You bet. So I'll share one thing that is personal to me, and I'll share one that's more work related. So personally, one of the things that I've started to do because I'm working from home is get up in the morning, have my coffee, and then go for a walk with my family before I start my day. It's a really nice way to connect with them, and it's a really nice way for me to kind of like feel like I'm arriving to work, even though I'm just coming back to my own house. So I found that's actually been a really nice thing that I think I'll continue doing going forward. And then with my team, I'm just going to share it because it relates to the last question. But one of the things that I've done is I now have a half-hour meeting with my direct reports every week where we're not allowed to talk about work. So the only things that we talk about is sort of what's happening at home, something, maybe something fun that we've tried or something new, a new strategy that we've tried. And I'm finding those have been really appreciated. And I think even in a return to work scenario, that kind of connection outside of the to-do list and the day-to-day is really helpful. So those are two things I would suggest.
Thank you. Now we're going to turn over to AJ. AJ, what are the prime differences between face-to-face versus high-res video communication and research, and how we as leaders might bridge the difference?
Okay, thank you for this question. And yeah, I would focus on a couple of things here. So the research indicates that nonverbal communication is extremely important and actually is worth more, at least 50%. Usually research indicates more than the verbal side of our communication. So nonverbals help us a lot. When we're on video conferencing, that's enabling us to have more nonverbal than a telephone call or an email, for example. But a lot of our body is gone. So usually you're just seeing the face, some facial expressions, much harder to get some of the gestures. So even, maybe sometimes I try and sit a little bit further back. I can do some gesturing. I can bring in some visuals that can help a little bit. I'd also mention just that moving from face-to-face to virtual anyway, you're creating a certain level of distance. And so just that willingness to maybe open up, communicate, disclose might drop even from being in a face-to-face meeting with multiple people to being online. And I think, as has been referenced multiple times, this idea of the one-to-one check-ins, I think is really important, so that people might not be willing to even volunteer in a group virtual video conferencing setting some of the challenges they're facing, some of the things that could help them. And so having those one-to-one check-ins is a way towards high quality communication that can most approximate the face-to-face side.
Thanks, AJ. I think we have time for one more question, if you'll allow me, Colin. This one is for Lydia. My small apartment was not designed to work from home. It is a bit stressful. How can I adapt a tight space to avoid the work-based clutter I'm accumulating?
So this is actually a great question for me because I also live in a small apartment. I think the word clutter there is the key aspect, and it's trying to figure out what is the minimum amount of things that you need to have in your workspace. As well, there's also different things like different tools and equipment that you can get. So I actually I saw this question coming. So I have this little portable desk thing that I can basically bring anywhere. So I have it mostly lives on a little table that I use, my desk, so I can stand up and work. But I can also bring this to my couch if I want to sit on my couch and have a little bit more comfortable workspace. So getting tools like that, getting pieces of equipment that can help you. And I think just kind of keeping your things, like your stuff, organized. And as well, maybe looking to go a little more electronic. So maybe reducing the amount of paper that you're generating or the paper that you need to use, and try and find different electronic tools that you can be using.
Thank you, Lydia. Before turning it over back to Colin, I mean, I just like to maybe build on something that Janeen said in our presentation that actually really resonated with me. It's the concept of like, it's a personal journey for everyone right now, and it is a journey, and the journey is different probably for everyone, but there's like some similarities in, you know, what we're all experiencing. I think, you know, it's probably fair to say that, you know, this shock of an event, it's never going to happen again. And what I mean is that, yes, we might actually have to go back to social distancing when, you know, it is actually lifted. So it might happen again, but the shock is probably like a one-time, you know, we might never actually experience something like that in our life, or at least like, I hope that we will never do that. And when you like actually kind of go through a shock like that, I personally, sort of in the first week or so, I mean, obviously I was a little bit scared, but at the same time, I was very excited to take on the challenge and do COVID work with the government. And I was sort of like all organized, and I was happy that my kids were coming back, you know, home, and I'm going to have everybody under the same roof. And then I went through like a little bit of I'll call it a valley of despair. As things settled, as you know, the week advanced, it became like harder. And I actually personally like woke up, you know, a couple of weeks ago and said, there's no way, because now it's going to be at least until May 31st in Ontario, that I should be feeling this way. I should take the time to actually look at the personal journey that I'm going through and take this as an opportunity to reimagine myself, reimagine my life, reimagine like how I see and I live every day, and actually like build a different perspective on life for myself. So, I mean, that's why I really like what Janeen sort of mentioned around that personal journey. If you felt something like that, if you are in the valley of despair, wake up tomorrow and just say to God, okay, how do I actually make lemonade out of lemons? And kind of take, you know, a step back, and again, the opportunity to sort of look at what your life will be going forward. Because there's one thing is we might actually go back to our offices, but life as we knew it before COVID is never going to be the same. On that, I'll turn it back to Colin to close things off.
Great, and you know, I'll just see if anyone else actually has a quick reflection as well before we wrap up. If any of the other presenters want to take the podium for a second.
Sure, I will. I think one of the key things that I've been finding with working with my clients and just friends and others that I talk to is that there's often this pressure that we put on ourselves based on what we see others doing around us. And I think many of us have said that everyone's going through a different experience. And I think the key thing there is that to realize that you can't and shouldn't be comparing yourself in what you're able to do or not do to anybody else, because they're in an entirely different experience with different aspects. They may or may not have a spouse, they may or may not have kids or other loved ones that they need to take care of. And so it's just really important to remember to be kind to ourselves and try and avoid that comparison trap.
Great. So I think with that, we want to be mindful of the time, and I wanted to thank all of the participants today for sticking with us and taking part in the exercise, providing some great questions and comments. So thank you to the speakers, Jen for moderating, and Jennifer, Lydia, AJ, Janeen for your research and case studies and examples. So thank you. Wanted to thank our behind the scenes producers today, Geneviève, Kathy, Lydiane for making this run smoothly. And just in terms of some of the next webinars, Telfer is hosting a number of other similar webinars, as well as future Telfer forums will be listed in our calendar events shortly. You will get a link in the wrap-up email that you'll receive today. So please keep a note for that email that has a post-event survey. We do ask that you take a minute to fill that in. It's valuable feedback for us. And again, you will be receiving the recording of this full presentation in the following days. So merci beaucoup, thank you very much. Stay safe, stay healthy, and reach out and connect with others when you need to. So thank you very much, have a great day.